I do appreciate it.
We are recording.
We are recording. Okay, so welcome everyone to the first session for SIOP Promoting Academic Language Development for All. We are very excited that you have joined us today, taking time out of all of the busyness that you have. We are members of the ELD support team. My name is Kristen Mills. I also work for Harnett County Schools. I am the ELD support team facilitator and a member as well. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I am an ESL teacher in Harnett County, so I hope to be able to hear all about what you do as well. Micheline and Alicia, would y'all like to introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Kristen. I am Micheline Aoun. I'm a Title III program specialist in Johnson County Public Schools, and I am proud to be in the ELD support team. I'm one of the new members to the team, so I'm very blessed to be joining the team, and I'm very excited about this first session with you today.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Micheline. I'm Alicia Reed. I've been in education for over 30 years, special ed teacher, ESL teacher, SIOP instructional support coach, Title I coach, and a proud member of the ELD support team. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Greensboro College. So welcome, everybody, to our first session.
All right, thank you. We are super excited that you are here to join us. We have put a message in the chat box if you would like to take a moment and just introduce yourself in the chat box as well. We'll be looking at that and seeing who all we have here joining us today. I see we have some members from NCDPI here, as well as Vivian. Welcome. You are the ESL DLI lead teacher in Iredell County. So thank you for joining us today. And I know we have a few more. Just take a moment when you're able and go ahead and just introduce yourself in the chat box. Thank you.
All right. Now that we're seeing some more names showing up in the chat box, let's start talking about how are we feeling today, So we see in front of us Shakespeare. Don't we love Shakespeare? We hear it from teachers, from students, but we all know that it's also a controversial topic. So I'm going to start by saying to be or not to be, or to teach or not to teach Shakespeare has been a very controversial academic topic. On one hand, we hear some teachers saying they have excitement about teaching Shakespeare. So I'm going to read a quote from a teacher. She said, as a classroom teacher, I now share my passion with students of all levels. I use Shakespeare with my honor student, my at-risk students, and my special ed students. And she refers specifically to the multilingual learners, and she says that they are constantly internalizing their translating anyways, and are the quickest to paraphrase the most complex of excerpts. There is a pride in students when they click with what a stanza means. There is a light bulb that goes off, unlike any other, when they realize that these topics and phrases aren't unattainable. I felt this was beautiful, what she said. But on the other hand, we hear teachers echoing their Shakespearean frustration with what sounds like this. My kids deserve to study stories that represent and validate their experiences and cultures, something I know is important for their development. So with that controversy in mind, let's see how you are feeling today. On a William Shakespeare scale from 1 to 9, how are you feeling today as we start our journey into SIOP? So feel free to type in the chat box. We can give you a sentence frame. We always like to model what we use in a classroom, in the ESL classroom. So you can have a sentence frame, image number 1 or number 2 or whatever number you choose describes how I feel because. Or feel free to unmute yourself and tell us how you feel today. Again, on a William Shakespeare scale from 1 to 9, how are you feeling today? Maybe you can get a few seconds and type in your response. And it's great if you tell us why you feel that way. So Ivana said image 3 describes how I feel because I love SIOP and I'm celebrating this BL opportunity. Donna, thank you for adding the reason describes how image 4 describes how I feel today because I am interested in SIOP and have so much to learn. All right, do we have any other responses or sharing about how we feel today? Or we can move on with the presentation with our session. Claudia said number 3. Certainly, number 3, ready to learn new ideas to implement SIOP. Great responses. So we feel like 3 and 4.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for participating in that. I think I'm at a 3 as well. I'm just excited to be here. It's been a while since I've got to talk SIOP. And so I love SIOP, and I'm just super excited to be here for that reason. And I cannot wait. I know everybody's very quiet, but I have very big faith that by the end of the session today, we will all be chatting it right up. So, with that said, we are going to talk really quick about the actual resources that you have. There is at the top of each slide, you're going to see this bit.ly, and it's going to take you directly to a folder. If you type that bit.ly in, it's going to take you to this folder right here. This is the folder that will house all of the resources we have for SIOP for these sessions. Now, the actual slide deck from today's presentation will be added after today's presentation. The same with next week's and the following weeks. There's a total of 3 slide decks, so since there's 3 sessions. But we will add each of those here, and any resources that we need for each session will also be added here as well. So just go ahead, make sure you bookmark this, or if you are able, if you're on Chrome like me, you can always just put the star right there and it keeps it there for you. But you will have access to this folder for as long as you would like to have access. So forever, if you would like to have it forever, that is completely fine. It is live and will be updated as needed. And we will talk about each of these resources, so do not worry about that either. All right, let me go back to full screen. All right. Alicia?
Kristen, I do not have that bit.ly handy. I do apologize. We have been asked to add that to the chat.
Yes, I'll type it in right now.
And then you can also see it at the top of this slide.
So it'll be on the top of all the slides from now through the end of the presentation. So today's agenda, what are we going to do today? Basically, we'll be setting the stage, right? Getting us ready to understand why and how the SIOP model can promote academic language development for all students. See how I did that? Academic language development for all students is the title of the workshop, the course. We're also going to look at the brain compatible classroom. So let's think about that for a moment. When was the last time you actually thought about neurological research or neuroscience, or in other words, the brain at work? Okay, well, today we are going to read and discuss an article about the brain, how it works, and how the brain is able to hold all the information that we feed it. The article is The Brain Compatible Classroom, which is in the folder that Kristen just told you to bookmark, and we'll do that activity shortly. It's also in that bit.ly that is also in the chat in case you can't see it on the screen. And then, of course, we'll be looking at Multilingual Learners 101. So we will review the foundations of best practices for our MLs, including acquisition, acculturation, and their affective filter. Something that I'm sure if you've been working with ESL students, Ls, MLs, we've heard these words several times throughout our teaching. So that is what is on our agenda today. Now let's look at what are our objectives, because with any good lesson, we're going to show you our objectives, we're going to tell you what the objectives are, and then we'll return at the end to make sure that we actually met our objectives. So basically, we're going to explore the brain and memory function in relation to student engagement, as well as understand the foundation of best practices for MLs. What I just said in terms of our agenda, looking at that acquisition, the acculturation, and their effective filter. Okay. So we're going to start out with a little activity. And in the chat box, you see this big word on your screen, student engagement. So we all know what student engagement is and what to do in order to engage students in the classroom, in their learning. But when you hear the word student engagement, or the words, those two words, student engagement, what is one word that comes to mind for you? And if you'll place that word in the chat box, you might have several. So place one and then we'll read and come back and see what else. I got interest, collaboration, participation, invested. There again, interest, involved. I like that.
I like the invested. That means like they own it because they're
Yeah,
part
right.
of it.
Curiosity. So these are great words, right? We want our students to be interested in their learning, right? In order to be engaged, they probably are interested. So think about that. If they're not engaged, maybe the lesson is not interesting to them, or they just can't relate to it. We definitely want it to be a collaborative effort, right? We know that especially with our students, sometimes when they work together, they get a little bit more out of the assignment or the lesson, right? So if they're collaborating, then they're participating. All the words that you guys have said, they're interested, they're involved, definitely have to be involved. And I like curiosity, right? You want them to be curious about their learning and about being engaged in the activity, because then they'll want to learn more, right? And they'll participate more. So really good words for student engagement. Now I talked about the brain compatible classroom. We are going to read that article. It's 2 pages, it's not very long. And then we are going to star any of our ahas, check mark any of the things that we already knew about, right? We know about that. What about put a question mark next to ideas you want to know more about, and then underline practices or strategies that support language acquisition for MLs. So if you go to the resources that Kristen shared, or go to that bit.ly, we can pull up the first one, the Brain Compatible Classroom PDF. And then we have a timer on the screen, just like we would when we're working with the students. Sometimes we need to give them a little timer. So we'll take some time to read this article and annotate it, and then we will come back and discuss it.
Alicia, can I
Yes.
just say something right quick before we start annotating?
Yes.
Normally, guys, when we would do this activity, obviously we would be face to face, or if you're in the classroom and you're doing this virtually, you might use Cami. If you have Cami installed on your computer where it says open with Google Docs, if you click that down arrow, it should be right there. If you don't, like I do not, you can connect and you can download Cami. If that is not in your comfort zone for today, just take some notes about what you would like to discuss, or any ahas, just quick jots. You do not have to annotate if it is outside of your comfort zone, because we are here to enjoy and learn, not
Right.
to be stressed by any means.
And Cami is Kami.
Yes.
Correct, Kristen? Right.
Yeah, I think you can click that search and then you can download it just like that. So,
But even so, you could just at least see, like what Kristen said, where your aha moments after you've read are. You don't have to necessarily, check and underline if you don't have Cami or a system that would allow you to do that. So we can start the timer. And you can always look back up at the screen like the kids do in the classroom to see how much time they have left and then rush through the ends like the students do. Okay. I hope that was enough time for everybody. We will get started. So let's look at, did anybody have any aha moments after reading the article? Feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Donna says, think, pair, share is powerful. Use it. Yes, and it's so easy to use. When I was reading the article, literally right at the very beginning, when it says, we are all born with the capacity to be so and to continuously improve our own intellectual capabilities. That was an aha moment for me. As well as in terms of, we know that the brain is malleable and wired to learn, right? We know that. But reading it and seeing how we can improve in our ESL classrooms, right? Even with the think, pair, share, and showing that the kids can. And that was one of the big things in the article. They say one way of showing students that their brain can, and thus helping to shape a positive mindset. And they have can in all capital letters, was a big takeaway for me. Rebecca says, I think we talk a lot more about comprehensible input than output with MLs. It's easy to forget that they need to talk to master language. Most definitely. If a student doesn't interact with new information that they learn, they lose it. It fades after 10 to 30 seconds. That was an aha as well, right? So if we also look at our takeaways, right? The takeaways from the activity, which would be our ahas, our question mark, or what are practices or strategies that can help support other than the, the think, pair, share activities.
Alicia, one of the powerful things that I read is it where it says the hard way to learn is that there's two ways to learn, the hard way and the easy way. And the hard way is by intensively firing it, by thinking about it, talking about it, reading about it. You're doing the same thing. You're using it, and using it until it's wired. Or we can actually go in and get excited about it. The easy ways through arousal, where they're actually connected to it and we're excited and we're talking, and we're speaking, and we're doing. And I think that's really where, like, that we don't even think about how powerful the think, pair, share is, but it is so powerful because it allows for them to do all of that. So that was my big aha reminder.
Vivian also said the aha moment, the reminder that our mindsets determine our success. Suppose the teacher brings a positive attitude in the classroom and pours it all into creating meaningful lessons. This mere fact will help ignite students' curiosity to learn.
That was very important to me as well. I feel like the whole purpose of the article, other than the scientific aspect of it, I like how it highlights the can do that brings us back to WIDA.
Yeah.
And I like how it highlights the curiosity and the positive approach and the positive attitude toward multilingual learners, which can ignite their curiosity and their learning.
Exactly. Right. I had also highlighted that if they don't interact or repeat the information, it fades in 10 to 30 seconds. Donna also added that educators cannot expect children to learn what they don't teach, and children cannot learn what they don't deem learnable or within their capacity. Okay.
That's beautiful and very true.
And when we were saying there's also some added benefits, right, within the article specific to our population. But they say some examples include thinking out loud, problem solving, brainstorming, your quick writes of ideas and paraphrasings, all the things that we are probably doing in our classroom, but didn't even realize it has scientific value, like what Kristen was saying. Stop and think breaks. You know, that's another way that you could, okay, let's stop for a moment, let's think about it, and then come back, right? Questioning strategies. That way the students are gaining that experience, right? And the confidence. And there's a whole little section within the article. I said, article's only 2 pages, but that great, the added benefits, right? Ls get to orally answer their questions, right? When they're with a partner, right? Both of them get the opportunity to speak. So now they're also listening and speaking, right? We're going back to the domains of listening and speaking. You could do the think, write, pair, share, you know, throw the writing in there. There's so many different ways to get the brain learning and just keeping all that information in. Does anybody else want to share anything else that was an aha moment or something that they're doing in their classroom that they found very helpful that maybe wasn't in the article? Any strategy to support your MLs for language acquisition? So then this picture is Dr. Zandina holding a brain, right? The brain compatible classroom. And she says also that, you know, within the article that results suggest that when students speak during their learning process, they learn faster with more transfer and retention, right? So she also has a saying, fire it until you wire it, right? She is an educational neuroscientist and author, right? She says that there are multiple pathways to the student's brain and 6 weeks for the brain compatible classroom using brain research to enhance and energize instruction. Arousal is often considered the primary mechanism of the central and automatic nervous system. It's considered both psychological and physiological. So teachers can enhance a student's depth of learning, their learning speed, the retention, right? We definitely want our students to be able to remember, retain, use the information, as well as motivation through arousal. And arousal is activated by creating an engaging classroom, right? All the words that you used in terms of when we were on that student engagement slide, right? We want it to be a classroom where they are learning with one another and something that is going to be retained in their memory. Okay. We talked about fire and wire, and I will let Micheline discuss this more.
Thank you, Alicia. That was very, very powerful, and we love the saying, like, we must fire and wire until acquisition takes place, and this is very true. And we need to find the opportunities for our multilingual learners to be engaged and put in this situation so that they have the opportunity to live and benefit from the firing and wiring until they start acquiring the language. So this is beautiful, and we want to try as much as possible to put it in practice in the classroom. And I remember one time, one content teacher, before we moved to that part, she said, like, I try to engage my multilingual learners in different activities, and we shared with her some best practices of how they can interact, especially with the listening and the speaking part. And she said, like, I do it, and like, I feel like the students are really benefiting from that activity. Like, when I try to incorporate it, I don't get very excited about it, but then when I see how the effect on the student and how engaged they become with that certain activity, so it really brings me happiness, and I feel like I'm being a successful teacher. So these are situations where the firing and the wiring is happening, and we need to have more and more of these practices in the classroom. All right, so moving to understanding the foundation of best practices for MLs. So here, what we're talking about is we're talking about the memories, the different memories that we have in our brain. So we have the tactile or hands-on activities that benefit everyone and should be plentiful and encouraged with all students. And this is what we highlighted already. The reason for this relates to the two different memory systems in our head. As we're seeing on the screen, we have the semantic memory and we have the episodic memory and the other ones that fall under the episodic memory. So again, the reason for this relate to the two different memory systems in our head, the semantic and the episodic memory. They are actually in two different locations in the brain. And the semantic memory is composed of those things we have specifically set out to learn and remember. So for instance, if I say, who is the first president of the United States? Or if I say how many stars are on the American flag, or if I say 8 times 10, all of us were taught the answers for these questions, and we intentionally set out to remember them. So we store them in our semantic memory. So everything that is taught and we surprisingly still remember it, then this is the semantic memory. But if I ask you, what did you have for lunch yesterday? Like if you ask me personally, I suffer, my episodic memory suffers more than my semantic memory. Like I feel my semantic memory is stronger than the episodic memory. Or if I say, what did you do last Christmas? What did you do spring break? Now this one I can remember spring break still. What is your most memorable birthday? Would you also be able to answer these questions? Why? Yes, we could. Did you specifically set out to remember what you had for lunch or for dinner? Did you anticipate that you were going to be asked that question today? Did you go to bed repeating over and over what you ate or what you did? Of course not. We don't do that. But yeah, we remember them. Some people remember them easily, some do not remember them easily. But this information is stored in our episodic memory. And think about it that we have episodes in our lives. So that episodic memory is our works like our biography of everything that has happened to us. It is unintentionally remembered. So we remember all this information, but it's not really intentional. Now, these two systems are linked and networked together and often will help us with the other. Like I mentioned, like sometimes I use my semantic to support what I like in the episodic memory. We know that they are completely separate in the brain. However, because in some instances, a person will lose one, but not the other. And we read in some articles about Alzheimer's disease. People tend to lose their episodic memory. So that is why they cannot remember if they have children, if they're married, who their cousins are. But if you ask them about the first president of the US, they can remember. If you ask them how many stars are on the flag, they can remember the 50 stars. So these are the two differences between the semantic memory and the episodic memory. And we're going to talk more about the language acquisition using those memories. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you, Kristen. So there are two general ways of learning a language. And the first one is the way I think I learned language. I learned the English language. So back home, I had to do drills and memorize phrasal verbs that were so confusing. Now, for multilingual learners, the most challenging aspect of a language is, especially the English language, phrasal verbs and idioms. Now, that simple preposition in the phrasal verb, such as, like using the verb put, all right? Put for us was put. Then we started adding all the prepositions. We started adding the put on, to dress. Now we were told put down is to insult. I'm like, what is happening? Put on was to dress. Why put down is to insult? Why? I thought put on, you dress, put down, you undress. No, put down is to insult. Then you get to some phrasal verbs like put off that has two different meanings. Then you have to put through, put by. That was so confusing. And this is how I learned through the drilling and the memorizing of the phrasal verbs. Now, when I went to college, I spent most of the time learning English, again, repeating, substitution of the drills of all the time. I was very successful at picking the right word to put in the blanks, but having a conversation was somehow hard. Although I learned all the rules, we learned the rules, we did all the drilling. But once I moved to the US, I was able to begin acquiring a second language. I could experience the language in its natural environment and begin acquiring, trying to make sense of the various grammar and cultural nuances involved in mastering the language. All right. So at the beginning, it was all the drilling, and then you are put in a situation where you are learning how to acquire the language, but you are actually, this is the most successful experience because you have the opportunity to be engaged in a natural environment where that drilling happened before, but now the actual acquisition is happening and the wiring is happening. Excuse me. We get passionate about that topic. So going back to semantic memory and the other memories. So the semantic memory, again, is a category of long-term memory that involves the recollection of ideas and concepts. And as I mentioned, the grammar rules, the drilling, even like in math. So you say, I tell, and you choose to remember. While the other memories, I give you meaning and meaningful experiences, and you remember whether you want to or not. So these are the two differences. Kristen, can we move? I think I covered that part as well. So again, the learning and the acquiring. So I mentioned that learning is when you do all the drilling, you're trying to memorize all the grammar rules, whatever. And then once this is happening in your memory, then the acquiring happens is really when you are involved in an environment, natural environment, where you have the opportunity to use everything, pulling everything from your memory and try to use it in a real situation. Thank you. So now we'll talk about hard. Learning is hard. So when again, going back to that experience, when we were learning all these phrasal verbs and the idioms, that was hard. All right. But once you acquire the language, it becomes easy to learn, if that makes sense, because now you have acquired the language, you are put in an environment where you have ownership of everything that you've learned, everything that you have stored in your memory. And now that learning, that acquisition becomes easy. So learning is hard, but when students acquire language, it becomes easy to learn because now you have the foundation and you are building on that learning process. After you acquire, the learning becomes much easier and much more enjoyable, I would say. And this is how we hope we can provide our students with the situations where we're teaching them. We have to teach them all the rules, we have to teach them all the skills, all the standards. But at the same time, we want to give them the opportunity to feel successful once they acquire that learning and have the opportunities of applying that learning. Next slide, Kristen. Thank you so much for helping with the slides. All right. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the acculturation and the second language acquisition and how we need to make sure our students get to live that experience, and we need to get to know our students. So talking about second language acquisition and the acculturation model, which is a theory that describes the acquisition process of a second language. And basically, this is by members of some ethnic minorities. Typically, they can be immigrants, migrant workers, or children of such groups. And this acquisition process takes place in natural context of majority language setting. The main suggestion of the theory is that the acquisition of a second language is directly linked to the acculturation process. And learners' success is determined by the extent to which they can orient themselves to the target language culture. And this is what we hope with our multilingual learners, that with that acculturation, they can become successful and they can orient themselves to the English language, which is their target language. And we need to get to know our students and help them with that acculturation so that they become more successful in the academic environment and in their lives in general. Feel free to unmute yourselves. What you think about the different types of memories, learning versus acquiring, what you witness in your classroom with your students, about the acculturation process. Feel free, to share anything. Unmute yourself, and if we don't have anything to be shared, we can move on with our presentation.
We'll wait a couple of seconds to see if even anybody wants to put something in the chat.
Like, especially with the learning and the acquiring of the language, like how you see when you have your, especially with your newcomers, how you see that learning part is hard, but once they, like, science and studies have shown that newcomers, they progress the fastest, in their language acquisition. So, and this can be related to the learning is hard, but once they acquire, learning becomes easier. So I think now I'm just thinking about it, maybe this is the reason behind it. Once they learn, they fire and wire, and we see more progress with the newcomers.
Thank you, Micheline.
Thank
We're
you,
going to go
Kristen.
ahead and we're going to move on to the who and the why. We're going to take a moment, just as we would at the very beginning of a school year, and we're going to just stop and think about who our MLs are and why they are who they are, why they learn the way they learn, why they think the way they think, that sort of thing. What makes them different? Why do they need and why do they require those modifications, the accommodations? And what makes their learning needs the same or different from their English proficient or English only speaking peers? All right, so we're going to do a little activity. I'm going to introduce it, and then we're going to try using an annotation tool. So we're going to cross our fingers and hope this all works. But the whole purpose behind this activity is for us to be able to take a walk in our ML's shoes, because the best way to actually understand someone is to think from their shoes per se. So we're going to do a little bit of ELD one-on-one for acculturation and second language acquisition, implication and impact. for our veterans that are on here, maybe you've been in the ML world for a really, really long time, this is going to be a great review and affirmation of what you already know. For maybe the newcomers among us, like new to the teaching or even just new to the ML world, this is going to be a great introduction to how our MLs think. So I am going to give everyone access to annotate. When I click this annotate button, if it works the way it did in practice, you should be able to annotate. If you, at the top of your screen, or it might even be at the bottom, you'll see an annotate button. If you click that annotate button, I'm hoping everybody can see it because I know my screen's a little different than everyone. And I'm checking the chat to see if there's anything in the chat, but I want everyone to click that annotate button. Okay, I'm getting, and then when you click that, I will have to prove that it works. So, and then your actual mouse should turn into a marker of some sort. Okay, so what I want us to do to make sure that the annotation works, because you're going to have to be able to think quick on your feet for this activity, is if you see my Bitmoji down here, I want you to put a, oh sorry, I'm trying to multitask here, y'all. Forgive me. I want you just to kind of put a dot or something around the globe so you know that it works. Or if you can't figure out the globe, if you want to just scribble all over this page right here just to make sure it works, make sure you like the color you have. You should have a toolbar on the side that you can go and change the colors for it, whatever you need to do, but we are going to be quick on our feet thinking for this activity. I'm very excited about this activity. Okay, so I think everyone's good. I'm not seeing anything in the chat box. I think I have approved it for everyone.
I see happy faces and circles and thin lines and check marks. So yes.
Yes.
It's working.
It's always fun when you get to draw on the teacher's screen, right? That's what my kids at school are like, oh, Miss Mills, come on, give me that opportunity. So yes, they get really excited. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to give you a map of the world. When you see that map of the world, I'm going to tell you the name of a continent, and I want you to put a dot on that specific continent. Or, you know, maybe your dot doesn't show up, make it big, or do a smiley face, a check mark, whatever you want to do on that continent. Okay? So everybody's thinking quick on their feet. Now let's see if this is where it gets a little tricky. Okay, so place a dot on Asia. All right, that one was easy, right? Okay, we got this. So then this is where I have to remember, where's my little mouse? Because I can't go to the next. Oh, I can. Okay, awesome. Place a dot on South America. Oh, I can't clear those though. I need to clear those. Okay. I have, oh, there I am. Okay. I was close to South America, I guess. All right, so I'm going to do that so they clear away. Okay. Place a dot on Australia. Okay. All right. Let me clear those. Here's your next one. Place a dot on Australia again. Very good. All right. I have to click. Okay. And then last but not least, place a dot on North America. Yes, it's like complete opposite, right? Very good. Okay. So, what was unique about that activity that we just did? Did anybody catch what was different about it? Feel free to unmute or put it in the chat box. Yes. Ha, I did trick you. This is really fun to do in the classroom. With my littles, when we were learning our consonants, we did this, and I just did it as a trick one time, just for fun, just for fun. They were like, "Oh man," they had a thing, but we used fly swatters, and they got to hit the screen with it, and they really enjoyed it. But yeah, it totally flipped all the continents upside down. This is MacArthur's Universal Corrective Map of the World. I'm not sure if anyone's ever heard of it or not, but the first time you saw it, and I said, "Find Australia again," what did you think? Were you like quick on the money, or did you realize it was different?
It, total disorientation, right? And
Yeah.
spatial orientation, as what Donna said. Like what I knew to where it was, and literally where I just placed the dot. Now all of a sudden, everything has changed, and I had to really look and see, well, where is it now? Because it's not where I thought it was supposed to be.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
agree with Ivana. You tricked us.
So, with that, I just want to kind of connect all the dots really quick. Think about this just for a quick minute. How is this activity kind of the way, like, what happens to our newcomers when they come to America? How does it transpose to the view that they have when they get here for our MLs? Yes, I agree, Donna, completely. They have that background, some background knowledge, not a lot. They have a little bit of perspective, a little bit of schemata about everything that they're doing, right? But they don't know how to apply everything they already know in a new setting. And exactly, Kelly, their world is legit upside down. They know a lot and they can't express it. You see a lot of frustration. And that's really what we're going to start talking about here in just a minute is the whole acculturation stages. So, really quick though, just a little history on MacArthur's Universal Map. If you have never seen this map, this is a real map. This a student, he actually was from Stuart MacArthur. He was from Australia, and he was supposed to draw a map. He drew the map. He's 12 years old, and this is how he drew it, but his teacher told him he drew it wrong. Well, long story short, he decided, no, I'm not wrong because this is the view from where I live. And I think that is so powerful because for him in Australia, he's on top of the world. That is his view from where he lives. He sees everything going downward. So it's just very powerful to stop and think that in reality, no matter where you're at, your view is always going to be different. So our perspective kind of was confused. Like when we saw this map, we were like, oh, wait a minute, that's not right. But is it really that it was confused, or we just were looking at it upside down because we were in a different place? And so we have to stop and think about that, just like with our MLs. Like we know they know these things. They have the perspective, they have the schemata and the background. Okay, they have all of these things. They just can't express it the way they need to when they are first learning English, when they are acquiring the language that they need. And so we really have to stop and think about this with them and help them. And we're going to talk a little more about that as well, so that they can understand and express and learn the world that's around them without so much frustration. All right, so we are briefly going to talk about the stages of acculturation. So there are 4 different stages. Stage 1 is the honeymoon stage, okay? And the honeymoon stage is just what it is. It is great. They just got here. There's lots of cool new things. I'll use one of my students that I just got. He's in kindergarten, super, super sweet little guy. But we were having a conversation, and the office one day, and the school that I'm at is a very old school. Like we have window units for AC units that is that old. It does not have actual AC going throughout the building. And so we're in the office and it's really hot, and all of a sudden the AC unit comes on, and he's like, oh, what is that? And I was trying to explain it to him because he does know some English, but where he came from, they did not have a lot of the things that we have here. And so I'm explaining it to him, and I told him, like, when the room gets to a certain temperature, this is what it is. And he's like, no, you're magic. You made that happen. This is magic. And so I kind of had to explain that. But then, like, another time, just a few days later, when the principal came over, the intercom, he's like, my school can talk. That is so cool, right? So he's in the honeymoon stage. This is all great. Then we get to the culture shock. Okay, stage 2. This is where we honestly will see depression in some sort of form sink in with our students. And it's not depression as like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad, but like depression as in, I don't know what's happening. Why is this happening? Why can't I express myself? More frustration, okay? But they describe it as depression. So all the shiny has worn off, okay? The new world's not as cool as it looked. Our ML's perspective on everything seems to be conflicting with the new way things work. Like everything they know does not seem to always work here. They can't express themselves the way they want to. They don't understand. They don't have those peers who are so eager to help them anymore. Maybe their peers are tired of helping them. There's all these different factors, especially as they get older in school. Their schemata and background is not what it was. Like everything that they knew, they are questioning. And things are changing, and for some, it's getting more challenging. And another example with the same new student that I got who's in kindergarten, we in our district have to do fire drills monthly as a practice. Well, he had never experienced a fire drill, and it happened while he was in the library. And I happened to see him for class after the library, and he was explaining to how this noise went off, and all he kept saying is that school on fire, school on fire. And I had to, like, I'm trying to explain to him, no, honey, the school is not on fire. It's just practice. But this really, really scared him, and he was very confused and honestly just could not get over this. So I reached out to his parents, and they helped explain and everything. But they even said when he got home, he was very concerned that the school was on fire. And it's just even those little things that our students end up in this culture shock because they are not used to everything that we do here in our structure and our rules, if that makes sense. So then we move into stage 3, which is the limbo. And the limbo, we see them kind of coming out of that, oh, I'm not so sure, I'm doing the right thing, I'm not liking this so much, but now they're kind of like, they're starting to get their groove back, okay? They're just kind of like the limbo dance. They're like going up and down, and they're not real sure, but the culture shock's wearing off. They're becoming more comfortable. They're starting to acquire the language. They're starting to kind of figure out on how to use the language and how to express themselves, but they're still also very conscious about how they're perceived by their peers and their teachers. You see a lot who get into this stage of limbo, and you can really see they want to express themselves. And these, I really think of my students that really come out in ESL class. Like I just see them explode, and they're talking and learning and so excited, and they get back into class and they're still not sure about things. And so I've even had some of their teachers come to class with me, and they come and they sit in there like, oh my gosh, I've never heard them talk. This is amazing. And that really helps to bridge that. And finally, it gets them to that stage 4, that acculturation, the aha that we want them to get to. And once they get to that acculturation, no, that is not the key. They've mastered the English language. That is not the key that everything is perfect and hunky-dory, but it is the key that they have become confident with their new culture. They have figured out that balance that they need so that they are okay here in their new culture, and they can still have their other culture with them, and it's not like one or the other. They have learned how to merge everything to be the best person and to help both strengthen them, if that makes sense. They get the ownership of their language development. They're more involved in their learning. They participate in class. It's all those great things that we want for all of our students. So the key, though, is to mention is that there is no set timeline for how long this entire process takes for acculturation. For some students, it honestly depends on the ML. It could take, weeks for some, depending on maybe they've been learning English their whole life and they were preparing for this, and then they come here and things are not nearly as, oh my goodness, as for someone who, for instance, like my little kindergartner, who he knew some English, but the entire culture, the electronics, the technology is completely different. He did not have any of that in his home country. So it's very different. And then I have a student from Ukraine, and she came last year to our middle school. We have a very big middle school, but she came about January. We had a talent show in May, and she performed a Ukrainian dance on stage in front of the entire school in May, which is a really big thing because she was proud, and she went right into class, and she's been learning English, and she is motivated. Like she pushed herself to become acculturated to our culture, and she still talks about her culture, and she still flows and ebbs with everything, but she has pushed herself to become one, in a sense, if that makes sense. So she's moved through that process a little faster than some of the others. So I say all of this to go back to culture shock. When our students start to enter the phase of culture shock, and you're gonna learn more about this in the Canvas course that we'll talk about in a little bit. So I hope I have not lost anyone. If I have lost anyone, just put in the chat box, you lost me and I need some help, and we will totally back up if need be. But so during that whole culture shock, you're going to see that a lot of your MLs are not really talking. They might be going through their silent period still, which is what they normally start out in. And again, there is no set time for any of this. It's truly dependent on the student and if the student's an extrovert or an invert, personality, all of those things. But one way that we can help our students is through the affective filter. So we read the article, The Brain Compatible Classroom by Dr. Zadina, okay? And one of the things that she has really explained is that the most important pathway is emerging everything, all the new neuroscience, merging it all together to form the arousal, okay, that emotion, really connecting it and allowing them to really talk about it and show and teach, okay? The big thing is that as we do that, especially the emotional intelligence, when we express to our students in a positive manner, that's going to help lower the affective filter, okay? And then if they hear a negative impact, sarcasm, a lot of times our students don't understand sarcasm, put downs, even from other peers, that ups the affective filter. So if you think about it and you look at these coffee filters, when we have less coffee filters, our coffee beans really can make us some dark coffee, give us lots of energy, exactly what I probably don't need in my life, but love to have anyways. And if we have lots of coffee filters, those coffee beans can't go through and make that really dark coffee with all the caffeine and energy that I need. Okay? So how do we get that? Well, we have to provide the warm, respectful environment that our students need to learn the language, the concepts, the skills, and the academics, okay? That is us lowering the affective filter. We're going to be able to do that using SIOP. We're going to talk about that more in our next session too. When the environment is scary, non-respectful, the students aren't sure if they can express themselves, excuse me, I'm sorry, that affective filter is higher, meaning that we cannot get what we need. We cannot keep everything we're learning in our brain because we're scared to make those moves. We're scared to show what we know. We're scared to express. Our emotions are like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything, if that makes sense. So, excuse me. My question is, how does acculturation impact our MLs? Take a minute, unmute, or put it in the chat box how it impacts our MLs socially, emotionally, academic, or in other ways. And you can even think about the affective filter and how that helps with them learning how, when that affective filter is lower, how does it correlate with acculturation so that they can move through those stages, if that makes sense. So socially, when I think about that, I'll share my thought in a moment. So Vivian, yes, there can be negative changes in behavior, especially socially. If I think about my MLs that come in, they don't fully understand the social aspect of some middle schools, and it just is what it is, especially when they're bigger middle schools. And so everything, like in the honeymoon phase, they're just kind of smiling and laughing, and they're going about it because they don't understand, right from wrong in that sense of what some kids may be doing and not doing. But then once they start to see, hey, they're kind of being mean to me, it's not that they think I'm cool, it's that they realize I'm different. That really impacts them in that negative way, and they start to kind of sink down, and that raises that affective filter where they really aren't able to express themselves and learn and acquire the language the way we want to. So it definitely impacts their language. I totally agree with that. Socially, you feel like an outsider or you feel accepted. It's one or the other. And, I also think in a sense socially, Donna, that sometimes it's different for our boys versus our girls when they come to our school, at least in middle school, I can say. Like, even my girls all the time are like, Miss Mills, can we come practice when we were practicing for our access testing, they're like, can we come practice speaking with you? Can we just do the test practice as just girls, so when we record, it's just us and there aren't any boys in the room? Like, they just get a little bit more shy. So I think there's all those factors because they all want to be accepted, but they feel like that outsider and don't know how to be accepted totally. Emotionally, yes, you either feel safe or you feel scared. And we hope they all feel safe. And sometimes they don't know how to express if they feel safe or scared. Academically, they feel behind or ahead, feel lost or engaged. I had a student from Honduras, and I will never forget this student. He was in high school, supposed to graduate. It was only his second year here in the States. And when he wrote in Spanish, he sounded like a philosopher. Like you could read it, you can see like college level all day long in Spanish. He did not he was not able to express himself that way in English. And so school was a very big struggle for him, especially just coming in and going straight into those high school classes. And I remember him just one day sitting there and just crying because he could not express himself. And he's like, I can do this, but I can't because I don't understand how to. But he knew, and it's that frustration. So, yes, it looks like sleeping, hiding in the bathroom, tummy aches. A lot of them call to go home. They just aren't comfortable, and it makes them feel isolated. Because again, they're not able to express themselves. Everything's so different, and I agree. They will avoid social situations because they're not sure about them. So again, knowing all of that, that's where the affective filter comes in. And we really always think about academics when we say this because we are in the classroom and we're the teachers and we want them to learn and we want them to acquire the language and we learn the concepts, all of that. But we even have to make sure that affective filter is lowered for social situations so that they are able to feel safe and learn and feel accepted by their peers in that warm, respectful environment. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that come into play, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in the next session, as in how SIOP relates to everything. We just kind of wanted to introduce it today because this is the why. The acculturation, the affective filter, this is the why we use SIOP, okay? SIOP uses research-based practices, best practices to help MLs and all students develop their academic language, okay? We can apply SIOP and we can use the SIOP, the whole entire SIOP umbrella, which we're going to talk about next time. I'm getting ahead of myself and I'm trying to hold my tongue, and it's very hard to because I get really excited, so I'm sorry about that. But basically, the way SIOP works, and again, we will learn all about it next week, is it helps us to scaffold everything. It helps us to see that all of what we need our students to accomplish and what we need to provide our students, we can do for the acculturation process, for the affective filter. We can lower the affective filter. We can make everything right there. We can make their perspective, their schemata, their background be part of the lesson where they get that ownership and they feel as part of the lesson, not just, oh, well, nothing makes sense. We can do all of that, and the SIOP model helps us. So that's our big why for the moment. And I'm going to be quiet about it for now because we're going to talk more about it next week. And I saw there was a couple more notes in the box. It's frustrating for them because of the lack of language. They're perceived as dumb when they aren't. And that's the hardest thing to watch, is them know what to do. I mean, as simple as math terms. I had a student, she's like, but we don't use this term. What is this term? What is this little X thing? This is not what we use. Because they used the circle for times, and her teacher was using the X mark. And that it was something as simple as that. And as soon as she realized that it was the same thing, she was, aha, I'm good in math now. I get it. But it's just that frustration. So on that note, because I could just talk about this forever and hour, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to pass it along to Alicia.
Thank you very much. So as I said in the beginning, we discuss our objectives. We have them written out. We speak them. Sometimes we have the students read our objectives. And then at the end of the lesson, we come back to it. So on your screen, there should be a little happy face with a plus sign to show your reactions. I don't know if you guys have that. But I would like you to, if we did meet our objectives, give us a thumbs up, or you could just put it in the chat box. Did we explore how the brain and memory function in relation to student engagement? Did we do that? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways.
I saw 2 or 3 thumbs up.
Oh, I see them on the side now. Yes. And it's
Yes.
actually moving, going up. Okay, very good.
Oh, and
Lots of
Donna,
technology
It goes
when
by
it works.
very quickly. If you're not looking at the screen, you don't see it. I see Donna's doing it now. It like fades away. So very good. Thank y'all. Give us a thumbs up if we now have some understanding of the foundation of best practices for MLs. And we talked about acquisition, acculturation, effective filter. A lot of information there that Kristen said we will go back to. But yay, I see the thumbs. Very good. Okay, thank you. Thumbs up. Somebody wrote in the chat, thumbs up. Okay. All righty.
All right. One thing I like to add, I was reading in the chat box all the notes, and these are great. Thank you for everything you added to our sessions, to the discussions. Just adding one note about the frustration that they can have because they lack the language and they can be perceived as being dumb. And this actually happens, unfortunately, a lot at the secondary level. And I believe this is our roles as educators, whether we are ESL teachers or content teachers, to find the opportunities. It can be one opportunity where you can provide that student with a successful experience. Like if there is any activity they're working on and they feel like frustrated, they don't have the language, try to give them one activity. Try to see where their forte is and give them that opportunity to feel successful and to prove to the others that because we don't own the language yet, it doesn't mean that we don't know. So as ESL teachers or content teachers, we need to be very explicit and we need to target those areas so that we can make them feel successful. Anyway,
Yes.
preparing for the next session. I just felt I needed to add that.
Yes.
Note. Yeah. We hope that this session was very helpful and thank you for the thumbs up. We appreciate that. So our next session is April 19th, next Wednesday from 3:30 to 5:30. We hope to see you there and we hope to bring more friends so that they can join us. They can watch the recorded session and can join us in the second session. And we would like for you to complete Module 1 and Module 2 in the SIOP Canvas course. So Module 1, SIOP Overview, Module 2, Language Acquisition, and then you can complete all the other modules at your own pace. So depending on your time, how you feel, you know, like sometimes like when you learn about a certain topic, you feel I can't wait anymore. I want to learn even more about it. So you do it on your own pace, but we would like you to complete Module 1 and Module 2 before we meet next week. Now, Kristen, would you like me to show the SIOP Canvas course and show them the modules?
So I have it pulled up. I'm gonna take everybody through it. I
Okay,
have
sure.
put the link in the chat box for you. We should have everyone's emails from where you joined today. Ivana, if I am wrong on this or sadly, please tell me right now so that we can correct it. But I will, if we do have everyone's email, I can also email you this link out as well because there's not a way to house the Canvas course in our Google folder, if that makes sense. So there is the link in the chat box if everybody wants to click on that link. And then I'm making sure that what I'm showing was showing on the screen. If you want to bookmark this as well so that you have it for your use, you can, okay? This is the SIOP Canvas course. There are lots and lots of great material here for you to dig deeper into SIOP. So this is the homepage, okay? And it's just going to explain how long it takes that you can even talk with your district. We will not give you credit for the Canvas course, but you can talk with your district about that and see what your LEA requires for proof of completion. It is a work at your own pace, okay? The SIOP Kickoff right here has also the links to actually join the 3 sessions. Obviously, session 1 is happening right now, but for session 2 and session 3. And then what we are asking you to do is modules 1 and modules 2 before next week, because then we're really going to be digging into the components of SIOP. So by you doing modules 1 and modules 2, module 1 is just about SIOP, a general introduction. And then module 2 is language acquisition, which we kind of talked a lot more about today, but that will give you the background knowledge to help with the modules 3 through 10. Modules 3 through 10 will be complete at your own pace, because we do know that it is that time of year where there's lots of things happening. So we just wanted to make sure that you had modules 1 and module 2 at least done to get you started, and then the rest of them will be complete at your own pace, that sort of thing. And we'll talk more about that next week. But just to take a quick look at a module, this does not work until I have done the orientation. All right. And so you would have to go through all of this and that sort of thing. I do have it pulled up so that you do not have to watch me do all of that in a sense. So let me go back to the home. This is, okay. So if I go to module 1, it's going to start you out with just the content objectives, and you'll be able to go through it. It has different activities. So if you're doing this with a friend, like the PLC activities, you can do it with someone else. If maybe you are doing this on your own, but you're like, you know what, I would like to do it with a friend, talk with someone. Get them to sign up for the next session, and y'all start the Canvas course together. Totally. Maybe you want to do it with your entire department. Go for it. It's completely up to you. If you are working independently, there are suggestions for how to do things independently as well. And so you will just go through module 1, again, just additional information, and then module 2, if that makes sense. And then next week, we will pick up with the components of SIOP. So you're actually going to know a little bit more information. So you'll be able to bring all the information, the background to the conversation from what you learn in the Canvas course, if that makes sense. Are there questions about Canvas, about how to use the Canvas course? Was everybody able to click on the link? Did it work? I know we're done early. What we're actually are going to be doing, because we finished early, believe it or not, things like this are always planned, so that you can kind of start going through, make sure that you are able to get into the Canvas course, complete the orientation, and start module 1. And that way we're here and we can help with any technical difficulties. I do see a question. What do colleagues need to do to get access to the Canvas course? So this Canvas course, you don't have to do anything at all, because the way it's set up is a hub. So you're able just to, anybody can go and view it and see it and use it to learn more. That is the great thing about this Canvas course. The only thing is, if you want some colleagues to come with you to the next session for additional, digging deeper into SIOP, then they would just need to register, and they can do that in the SIOP Kick Off. The registration links are right there. So they could just go ahead in the SIOP Kick Off and click right there at the midpoint check-in and the closing session to register for those. But anybody who has this link has access to the course. Just remember, you have to complete this orientation first.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you please repeat, how can I do so I can receive credits after this training?
Repeat what? I'm sorry, I missed that last
So
part.
we don't give credit. Your district, right, Kristen, has to issue you credit.
Correct. So your district will have to issue you credit that states what they'll tell you what you have to do for proof that you completed this Canvas course, and then they can give you credit for that. DEPI does not offer the credits or CEUs because of each LEA actually has it set up differently.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We provide a certificate. Ivana, can you elaborate on that at all? Or I know we'll provide a certificate for the synchronous sessions.
Right. And so that is something the way it's set up is we know you are working with us on the synchronous sessions, because the asynchronous sessions do not have something you're turning into us, and there's no way for us to know that you're actually participating. We're not offering that certificate. So as Kristen was saying, what you can do is you'll have the certificate for the synchronous sessions, and then you can also show the description of this course, and I would do that right away, to whoever is involved with your CEUs, and explain to them that you're doing the online course. Kristen, the online course describes how many hours it's expected to take, right?
Yes, right on the homepage when you get here is that third paragraph that says this Canvas course takes approximately 10 hours to complete.
And so then what you would want to do is take those materials and ask what kind of documentation they would need to see in order to know that you had completed the online aspect of the modules.
Thank you, Ivana. And remember, you have to complete this orientation before it will let you go into Module 1. And me, Micheline, and Alicia are going to be here. We encourage you to go ahead and log into the course, complete the orientation, and make sure you can get into Module 1. We'll be here till 5:30. So if you do have any technical difficulties with that Canvas course, we're able to help you right now so that you're able to get into it without any frustration.
Yeah, but they all build upon each other. So you have to do one and complete it to go on to the next one. You can't like, oh, I like building background, I'm going to start there. You have to start at the beginning, module 1, and then keep going and progress.
Thank you, Alicia. And yes, thank you, Vivian, for explaining how that works in your district, because I think each district's a little different. So thank you for that. Thank you, Rebecca.